if you would read our rule of conduct, please.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Bill Yem. I'm the Secretary of the Planning Commission. I'm going to read out to you the meeting rules of order. These are for every one of our meetings that we have monthly. Thank you for attending this meeting. Pursuant to Oklahoma law, the board can only consider the specific items listed on the agenda. All who wish to speak in regard to any agenda item must sign in before the meeting begins. Once the meeting begins, citizens who have signed in will be allowed to provide input regarding the specified item, their specified agenda item. When addressing the board or commission, please state your name and address for the record. Citizen comments should be directed only to the board or commission members. Citizen comments are limited to 3 minutes. Please do not repeat the comments of previous speakers. This meeting is governed by rules of conduct and a code of ethics approved by the City Council. That code requires that the members of the board continue the long tradition in Sand Springs of civility during meetings, proper conduct toward each other, staff, and the public, and open discussion of issues without personal attack or animosity. The board expectations in regard to civility apply to all employees of the city and to the public. Once the board begins discussion, additional comments are not allowed. We look forward to your input and a productive meeting. And just to explain how this is going to work tonight, I have a 3-minute timer once speakers come up here and start. At 2 minutes into it, I'll hold this sign up for you. And then when your time's out, I'll elbow bump the chairman and he'll time it down for you. There you go.
Okay, thank you. Still on? Okay, it's my intention as a chairman to try to make this thing happen smoothly and have it wrapped up as close as possible to about 8:30. It may not work out just right. It may go a little bit longer. We may end up with a little shorter, but I anticipate it probably being somewhere around that time. I just wanted to put that out there to begin with. Our secretary having read the rules, I'd like to also state that I'm going to make a brief statement before the roll call. So I want to let everybody know here in Sand Springs, our city councilors, planning commission members, and other various boards are all volunteers. Every member of this board present tonight has the interest of Sand Springs as a whole in mind. We intend to be respectful to all attending and expect no less in return. We're not going to allow character insults directed at anyone. This includes cross-talking, interjecting comments, or any form of heckling. If in the opinion of the chair, being myself, someone or some persons are violating our rules of conduct, they will be warned, and if the behavior persists, the chair will request that an officer handle the matter as they see fit. I only say this because sometimes passions run high, and for the sake of everyone attending, we want to conduct ourselves in a civil manner. Next, the Planning Commission considers land use requests. Some agenda items are final here and with this board, and some direct us to make a recommendation to the City Council. The agenda items being heard this evening are for recommendation to the City Council for a final decision. Our purpose for this meeting is to consider the applicant's request for needed changes to the land use designation of the property listed in the agenda items 3, 4, and 5 to facilitate rezoning and a planned unit development, aka PUD, overlay for the property. The process will be as follows. Brad Bates, our city planner, will provide a staff report. He will outline the application that has been submitted, give some guidance about the procedures and rules, and we may have questions for him. Number 2, the applicant and/or representatives of the property owner will make a presentation about what's being requested. Board members may have questions for those persons also. Number 3, public input. Notice of the application was provided to property owners within approximately 1,400 feet of the subject property. Those property owners will be among the first to speak. They will have 3 minutes each, as was Mr. Yema pointed out. Additional remaining time, 3 minutes for each, for new information will be allocated to other persons, starting with those residing in the city of Sand Springs. Rules that apply to the board: we will only deal with land use have comments about the project that are not related to the zoning or PUD, we cannot and will not take those into account. Relevant factors we can and should consider are in these categories. 1, location and access, meaning proximity of roads and traffic. 2, zoning district details. The applicant is requesting light industrial with a PUD, so comments about the zoning and use are appropriate as they relate to this location. 3, impact on surroundings, access, visual impact, buffering, noise, odors, and potential effects on nearby residential/commercial zones, requiring of setbacks or enclosed operations. 4, infrastructures and utilities, availability of capacity of roads, water, sewer, and energy are relevant. 5, local regulations and permits, requirements for building heights, fencing, security, and how those issues are addressed in the PUD. Lastly, we cannot guarantee, and this is important, we cannot guarantee that everyone will be able to speak tonight. If more than one person per property is here, we request one person speak for all. You must be signed up for the opportunity to speak. If your name is called to speak, please only speak of new information relevant to the agenda. With your cooperation, we will get to as many as possible in the allotted time. And I bring all that up because at 3 minutes apiece, it's easy to rack up 10 hours worth of time, and I don't think you folks want to be here 10 hours, and neither do we. Okay, next, we have a roll call, please, Cindy.
Mr. Stuckey?
Here.
Mr. Gardner?
Here.
Mr. Yedlin?
Here.
Mr. Shindell?
Here.
Mr. Neal?
Here.
Mr. Askew?
Here.
Mr. Dickerson?
Okay, with the roll call out of the way, we'll move on to item number 3, SSZ 517. And I believe what's gonna happen at this time is Mr. Bates is gonna step up and he is going to give us the relevant information. And we're probably going to discuss items 3, 4, and 5, if I understand correctly, and kind of bring them together in one explanation.
Yes, thank you for being here tonight, Planning Commission Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to speak before you. As you mentioned, since these are all subsequent items that are related, I'm gonna cover all the items in one fell swoop. The zoning, the PUD, the comprehensive plan. As you guys are aware, each item before you tonight will have to have separate votes on it when the time comes. But for the sake of expediency and trying to give everybody as much time to speak, I'm gonna cover all items under one. Then you can go into the applicant's presentation and then the public comment for any of the items that have been signed up. You do have the roll call sheet before you tonight. I believe, as you mentioned, there's a separate sheet for the 1,400 foot or roughly quarter mile that was sent. There should be roughly 49 properties that were originally identified. And then there's a separate sheet that shows the other individuals that have signed up to speak tonight as well. So with that, I'm gonna go ahead and get into the rezoning application. As you guys are aware, this is a property located off of Highway 97 north. It is a property of about 826 plus acres, currently zoned agricultural. The applicant is proposing to do an IL, underlying zoning with a PUD overlay. The surrounding properties adjacent to the proposed site are currently zoned agricultural if they are unplatted properties adjacent to it, or if they are in subdivisions that have platted lots, they are considered to be RS zoned according to the Osage County Planning Director, Jake Bruno. These properties range in size, but roughly most of them are approximately 2.5 acre tracts and go up to 150 plus acres in size, some even larger than that. The Sand Springs Comprehensive Plan currently shows this area to be agricultural or residentially zoned by the Comprehensive Plan. As you guys are aware, we'll get into that as a separate item, but that is what the current Comprehensive Plan shows. Cities by law, as I mentioned before, are required to send notice to abutting property owners within a 300-foot radius, to place signs on the property and put it in a paper of circulation. Fact of the matter is, the city didn't think 300 feet was adequate for this type of application, so we expanded that to the quarter mile distance on our own volition. We did that multiple times when the application was initially pulled off the meeting in December. We've sent new notice back out for this meeting in accordance with those same requirements that we set on ourselves. The industrial zoning district, what the zoning code calls it to be is to provide an environment conducive to the development of industrial facilities and to provide areas suitable for manufacturing and other industrial activities which have slight or no objectionable environmental influences. Industrial light allows a variety of use units. Those use units include agricultural, community services, cultural and recreational facilities, off-street parking areas, office, studios, support services, other trade services, business signs, scientific research and development, warehousing, wholesaling, and light manufacturing and industrial. The future land use section of the plan indicates, as I said before, for this to be, future land use section of the plan indicates that industrial uses may be allowed near residential areas if in a planned unit development are utilized to help mitigate potential impacts to adjacent properties, while the land use designation speaks to this mainly for industrial medium or industrial heavy categories. The applicant has willingly decided in the IL district to add a PUD. While the industrial light zoning may not require the PUD, if adjacent to residential property, it does act as a good safeguard, which is why the comprehensive plan speaks to that. If industrial is to be adjacent to residential, it should have a PUD overlay to help provide some of those safeguards and limit other uses other than what's intended. Proposed principal use of the property is a data center. As many here know and have heard by now, the data center use by our code is considered a use unit 25, light manufacturing and industry. This is a standard that you'll see in the Tulsa metro area. The cities around us have all classified it as the same thing. We have classified it just the same. What that category means is that there's no objectionable environmental influences by emission of odor, heat, smoke, noise, or vibration. That's what that category calls for in the zoning code. For the application and associated applications, the data center will hereby be defined as follows. It shall mean a facility or facilities used to house and in which are operated, maintained, and replaced from time to time computer systems and associated components, including but not limited to telecommunications, storage systems, cooling systems, power supplies, and systems for managing electrical and mechanical performance, and equipment used for the transformation, transmission, distribution, and management of electricity for on-site uses, internet-related equipment, data communication connections, private communication towers, and environmental controls and security devices. There is a very lengthy staff report here that covers a myriad of topics. I'm going to quickly try to go through those for you. The applicant does have a lengthy presentation that will elaborate far more than I did on these, but I do want you guys to know that staff did address all of these things in our staff report. City infrastructure. First and foremost, the city was approached by the property owner and development group that went out and sought a data center. At that time, we did an analysis of what our capabilities were to the community, what we could afford to give from a water infrastructure perspective, what we could do for a sewer perspective, what we could do from stormwater. We did a full analysis at that time of what we believed to be options for them to go out and market the property. We call this a will serve letter. We do it regularly for properties. We've had multiple will serve letters filed and submitted even this year. People see the project going on at 10th Street and 81st where a subdivision's going. That's not in our city limits. We provided a will serve letter to that developer to tell we would provide water of X capacity for that project. We did the same thing for a project you see going on at 41st and 129th. It's a Dollar General in Tulsa County. Tulsa County asked us to provide a will serve letter saying that we have the adequate service to provide that property. Standard practice for what the city does. As part of that, like I said, we gave an analysis of water. We have water available and that could be provided at this time, and you'll hear them talk about this. They have no intent of using any substantial amount of water beyond domestic use. And what they've defined that really as is they would intend to use water mainly for the purposes of sinks, restrooms, break rooms, toilets, food preparation, mundane things like that. That doesn't mean that they wouldn't have some sort of need for water for the facility in the future. At that time, the city would again assess our ability to serve water to them. water is always at the city's discretion on how much we are allowed to give or want to give. At that time, citizens and other projects will always take precedent over future growth of other people. Existing businesses, existing residential customers are always at the forefront. We are never gonna give away water that impacts other people. That just needs to be clear and made. Traffic, that'll be something that you'll hear about probably a lot. Highway 97 in this area, it is part of ODOT highway system. It is part of ODOT Division 8's maintenance responsibilities. It is classified by ODOT as a major collector, and that is designated as a non-NHS route. A non-NHS route is typically a smaller road, such as a local road or minor collector, that primarily serves local travel needs rather than interstate or intergovernmental travel. In non-NHS designated road still functions as a major highway in rural and urban areas with such critical linkage for travel across the state. Local jurisdictions often have more say and flexibility in things such as intersection signage, speed limit limitations. ODOT gives more preference to the local municipalities or counties to give weight into those type of roads versus ones that heavily have interstate traffic. This is a 2-lane road. I think everyone here knows that. It's a 2-lane road with bar ditches along it. It is by ODOT standard, probably a Class C road, what they call a level of service Class C. It functions with relatively low speeds and maneuvering closely controlled environment. Satisfactory operating speed can still be obtained though. That is straight from guidelines that are put out there by the Department of Transportation. That's what they classify it as. ODOT has looked at this road in rough terms. They claim that this road can handle a large capacity of cars. The area up north closest to Rock Road currently has about 490 cars per day using it. Further south on Highway 97, as you get towards the city's water tower and some of the subdivisions further south of it, there's about 1,400 cars a day. ODOT has indicated this road in its current conditions, and ODOT has indicated that this road in its current condition can handle anywhere at 45 miles an hour between 10 to 16,000 cars a day, depending on the conditions. I understand that seems like a lot. They will look at that as this project moves forward. If it does, they will assess the condition of the highway and put regulations on the developer. The developer may be forced to do upgrades to this highway, and they'll speak to some of those things that they would do. General numbers that would affect that, again, ODOT would assess it. They'll look at the number of driveways, intersections, heavy trucks, peak directional volume, etc. That is all stuff that they'll require as part of a permit to ODOT if the project moves forward to submit a traffic analysis for how their project will affect their state highway. Currently, the average day trips, like I said, around 490 on the north end. There is an email that was provided by ODOT that can be provided as backup that states where they assessed it and gave us the numbers that come from the manual that they use to determine roadway capacity. And I believe the applicant plans to speak to that some with their technical experts as well. Further, NCOG classifies this road as a major street and highway, on the major street and highway plan as a primary arterial. That document is really a planning document utilized for future growth and to allow the counties, the cities, and others to apply for federal funds, and the roads that are classified based off of intensity get categorized and given more money for funding in the future. That is a document that has the entire Tulsa metro region on it, and it does include this portion of Highway 97. But essentially that is a planning document put together by the regional COG organization to help people have some future plans for how they can plan for wider roads or improvements to roads and to get points for funding when they grade those projects. Electricity. I'm not going to dive into it in too great a detail because I'm not an expert in that area. However, in your backup, you have statements that have been provided by PSO. PSO has representatives here that will speak to that. But PSO is the electrical provider on this project. The project will be served by them, not by the Verdigris Valley system that's up around the project. They'll talk about some of those differences. But PSO has indicated that the user, Google, will pay for upgrades to infrastructure for their project. They will pay for those. And again, I'll let them talk about what that means, what that looks like in more detail, since they're here to speak on their behalf. Environmental, I want to be clear. The city of Sand Springs, we are heavily regulated by both the federal government and the state government to have certain permits. That includes stormwater permits that the city is under. Anybody that does development in the city under our permit, they're required to follow those regulations and to get permits from ODEQ, the EPA, all those organizations that people are aware of. We require that before any development would even take place, that they've gone through those proper processes and gotten those approvals and provided the engineering and backup information to us to review. Additionally, we have pre-treatment programs. If somebody puts water into our sewer system, they have to pre-treat it before it even gets into our sewer system. You'll hear some talk potentially about there is no sewer in the area. We're aware of that. Again, we've done an analysis of our infrastructure. That does not prevent people from petitioning DEQ to do other types of sewer and stuff. So they can do septic systems, aerobic systems. There are commercial and industrial grade systems. They have a permitting process for that EPA and DEQ oversee, and they give guidelines of how they can facilitate those processes. All that is still to be determined. Say that to say that there are always heavy regulation, not both from the state, the federal, but our local jurisdiction, that we make sure that the developments that come before us are done in a responsible manner. Next, I want to talk about noise and vibrations. The applicant will address this some in their PUD application before you. They have acknowledged that these facilities are going to have some level of noise. They are self-imposing restrictions on themselves of 65 decibels at property lines. There is talk about what 65 decibels is like. They will talk to you about what that's like and explain it to you in detail. Noise and vibrations. They have indicated that these facilities do not cause any vibration that will be of any disturbance to surrounding properties. They'll be mandated to do that. But again, their experts will talk to what that means and why their facilities don't cause these kind of issues that have been brought up. Emissions, you'll hear about backup generators. They have an expert here that will speak to emissions for you, but essentially they plan to use filters. They plan to use things in their everyday processes to minimize the impact to emissions for those generators. Those generators are intended to only be used in a backup emergency stance. That's what they will be permitted for. They will get permits from the EPA that say they're allowed to have X number of hours of run, X number of tons of output. All that stuff will be regulated. They have to get an air permit from the EPA before they can even move forward with a design. They have to submit that to them for review and approval, and there's a process that goes through. They set limitations. They'll talk to you about that to some extent. Just because it's designed and told they can have X amount of emissions does not mean that they will actually use that, and they'll talk to you some about that as well. Buffers for impact. You'll see in their application for the PUD they have buffers that they've talked to you about, that they've put in place with landscaping and other places, setbacks that are increased for abutting property owners. I did want to point out, this property, if it was straight zoned IL, would have much less stringent setbacks than what the applicant's proposing by a PUD. It's making it much further away. Agricultural zoning, in and of itself, has 0 height restrictions in the city of Sand Springs. It has 0 size requirements in the city of Sand Springs, and it only is required to be 15 feet from an abutting property owner. So you'll see as they go through some of their backup material, and I touch on other items, they have tried in their applications to expand those setbacks, expand the landscape buffers and things to try and appease the people in the area. I understand nothing is ever perfect. They've heard the concerns though, in our opinion, and they've tried to make concessions to make things better. Now I'm going to move on to the PUD and talk about it a little bit. There's a lot in it, but things that I think are important to note is this PUD, one of the biggest things it's doing is protecting the area around it. What I mean by that is the industrial light zoning in and of itself that could be approved without a PUD sets forth that they're limiting the use on this property to the data center use only and the ancillary uses that would go with it as they defined earlier. That is a key thing. There are a lot of uses in industrial light that I think people would far more object to than a data center if it was straight zoned. That is why it is crucial if this board and the council move forward with these applications, that not only an industrial light zoning be approved, but a PUD be approved with it. I do not see a scenario where that fits if one or the other was to be talked about. The industrial zoning in itself does not have the safeguards that the PUD is bringing to the table for these applications. Of note, the maximum floor area, they'll talk to you guys about this. And there's some difference of opinion that you'll hear about and we'll speak to it. Their floor area ratio is anything that is under roof, okay? That's how they've defined it. It is being set in the PUD at a 0.2 or a 20% ratio. The underlying zoning by PUD can allow up to 0.75. Their original application they came to the city with had a 0.75. That was one of the things we talked to them in depth about, was please look at how much you're using, what your setbacks, all the things I mentioned before when they brought forward their original application. That is part of why they held off after hearing public input and city input of going back to the table and trying to address some of these issues. So that's one of the things they'll talk about, is that increase. At this time, even though there's a 20% floor area ratio, they'll talk about it. Their intent, and they'll show their site plan here in a minute and go through it, to have only a 10% or less floor area ratio for the site. Yes, there's some ability to have some flexibility. They will talk to that and explain why that is. Building setbacks from Highway 97, they've set a setback of 400 feet. 300 feet from all other properties, so that would be the south, the east, and the north end would have a minimum of a 300-foot setback. Like I said before, these are, in some instances, much larger setbacks than you would see in other traditional straight zoning setbacks. For instance, the pro setback is 2 times the amount from Highway 97 and 4 times the amount required in an industrial district without a PUD. So they have tried to double, triple, quadruple in areas the amount of setback, in addition to other things that they'll talk about. In an ag, as I mentioned before, you are allowed on a front Highway 97 to be 35 feet from Highway 97. You are allowed to be 10 feet from the side yards of your neighbors. And the rear yards of your property, you have to be a minimum of 40. Those are the requirements of the City of Sand Springs Ag District. The maximum building height is proposed to be 40 feet. It'll have elements that can extend 20 feet above that. Again, in industrial straight zoning and agricultural zoning, which the property is owned, there is 0 height restriction currently. Security fencing, they propose to have some security fencing at the entrance to the property. And then inside the property setback of 200 feet, they will have some fencing if necessary, but their fencing is really intended to be closer to the building to leave natural areas for buffer and trees and things like that, that don't give the idea of, hey, this is a secure place that we don't want people to be. They want to try and keep the perimeter of these properties natural and add to it with landscaping, which I'll touch on in a minute. The natural area by the PUD, as I mentioned, that they intend to leave is a minimum of 300-foot area that will be left in its existing natural vegetative state. Area is required for streets, drives, drainage, detention, security fencing, and other disturbances may be allowed in those areas, but those will be minimal. The proposed landscape buffer will apply to a 100-foot area from any project boundary. In these areas, there is a requirement from 1 evergreen tree every 40 linear feet. All evergreen trees shall be at least 8 feet in height. At the time of planting, trees shall be planted in a staggered double row planting. Existing trees, wherever evergreen or indigenous, within the landscape buffer with a caliber of at least 4 inches or more may be counted towards that requirement. Where existing canopy is sparse or in transition from pasture, the developer may utilize engineered earth berms with 8-foot tall trees staggered on top of it. Additionally, an intensified landscape buffer is proposed that requires a 200-foot landscape area to be maintained from Highway 97, extending 3,500 feet to the east along the south property line. So if you imagine the property, it'll extend 3,500 feet along the south of the property line. In that area, the applicant is proposing there will be a minimum of 1 evergreen tree for every 20 feet, which is different than the other areas I mentioned of 40 feet. Every 20 feet, all evergreen trees shall be again at least 8 feet in height at the time of planting. Trees shall be planted in a staggered double row pattern. Existing trees, whether evergreen or indigenous, within the intensified landscape buffer with a caliber of at least 4 inches shall be counted toward this requirement. Whether the existing canopy is sparse or in transition from pasture, the developer may utilize engineered earth berms up to 8 feet with staggered evergreen trees on top of it. The final design must ensure that the combination of existing trees, berms, and supplemental evergreen trees creates a continuous visual barrier that is at least 8 feet in height within 3 years of installation. Again, these are what they're proposing. Signs are proposed to meet all applicable requirements of the city of Sand Springs. This is one, and I've had conversation with the applicant and their legal counsel. Staff is recommending a change from that. Staff recommends that signage be limited to the following. Wall signage will only be allowed to face west on building fronts, to be limited to 2 square feet of linear wall, which is somewhat consistent with our code, but it's limiting signage on south, north, and east facing sides that really serve no purpose. Pole ground signs shall be prohibited, but monument signs not exceeding 20 feet in height and no more than 2 square feet of linear frontage, not to exceed 200 square feet in size, with illumination, if any, to be by constant light. Roof signage is prohibited. Any other signage will be allowed in compliance with the City of Sand Springs zoning code. The 20-foot tall sign that I mentioned for a monument, that is consistent with the existing underlying ag zoning. You're allowed a 20-foot tall sign in the ag district. Lighting. One of the things we heard early on in this project was that the applicant needed to address lighting. The city went back to them and said, it'd be nice if you look at something like the dark sky limitations that exist that a lot of people refer to. At that time, they have a little concern with using the actual word dark sky because those regulations can change at times, but they did agree to use some of the verbiage that's used in that. That includes the screen and placing the signage or lighting to be down away from properties, not to allow light to bleed more than at a 90-degree angle from the bottom of the fixture. They want to limit the color temperature of those lights to 3,000 CCT or less, minimizing blue light emissions. They will talk in more depth about that before you. We feel like that is adequate change that they brought to the table after being talked to. With that, they will be required to submit a lighting plan at a certain time, if approved, to show that they have certain foot candles at property lines, which they have stated they'll have 0 at the property lines, and to show us that they're in compliance with those other regulations they're setting on. So they'll have to show us the fixtures, the lighting temperatures they're set at, all that. Noise levels, as I mentioned, 65 decibels previously is what they've set at the property line. There is some language in the PUD that talks about they are allowed to test it at certain intervals, and that 65 decibels is the average of that 1 hour run that they would do in a 60-minute period when tested. They'll talk to some of that. They've also come back and self-imposed some additional restrictions on mandating that they provide a certain number of years worth of decibel testing at the onset of the project, but I'll let them speak to that in more detail. Again, if it moves forward at the PUD process is just setting the regulations. There is in the PUD chapter of the zoning code regulations that exist for you must have signage, or you must have site plans, you must have landscape plans. In this case, they've imposed a lighting plan, building elevations, a subdivision plat has to be filed for this that will lay out infrastructure and stuff. At that time, they'll have to supply us with all the engineering calculations for that infrastructure, just like any other development would. Additionally, the council and planning commission can recommend other things that they supply. As I mentioned, they've willingly said that they plan to do some decibel testing and provide engineered decibel reports to us for a certain number of time. They'll speak to that. I think that's all I'm gonna cover on the PUD at the moment. And lastly, I'll cover the comprehensive plan quickly. So the comprehensive plan, as you guys may recall, I think a few of you were still on the board at that time, was updated in June of 2017 by resolution 1725. The land use master plan set out a plan for what we called the 2030 plan going through 2030. It's coming up on time to revise it and to do some changes to that plan, whether that be a substantial full redo of the plan or to do minor amendments to it to recognize existing conditions or things that have changed over time. The specific plan consists of a land use map and supporting text documents that contain specific goals, action plans, and recommendations for land use and development in the city and surrounding areas within the fence line. The map illustrates in a generalized manner the preferred land use pattern and development for all areas within the city and the fence line. Numerous areas are left as residential, as these areas are still relatively natural in state and should be left to future designation as development occurs, spurning the need for additional planning efforts. As adopted, the plan is a policy document providing guidance to city officials. They develop future budgets, plan for expansion and infrastructure and other services, and make important land use decisions such as rezoning requests. This plan is a long-term guiding document intended to help you realize the anticipated future development pattern. However, it is not firm and is not an inflexible document, as growing patterns and land use scenarios are subject to change over the course of the next 15 years. That's what the plan said. During preparation of the plan, there was no way to predict with any level of certainty all the changes that may occur in Sand Springs and surrounding areas during the plan's lifespan. Recognizing the unforeseen changes occur, the plan is a flexible document that provides a reliable tool for evaluating development proposals. Procedures are identified, allowing amendments to the plan when warranted. Amendments will be evaluated based on how they advance the goals of the plan and the change is still consistent with the overall concepts of the plan. The Sand Springs Comprehensive Plan sets out under plan element economic development to become a community that desires to strengthen economic stability of the community by promoting, retaining, attracting businesses, beautifying public spaces, and encouraging growth and development within the community by strengthening the desire of various private sectors to be in Sand Springs. The city is ultimately preparing itself for ability to be sustainable long term. Further, Goal 7 of the economic development section of the plan states Sand Springs will have a strong, independent local economy that complements the surrounding region but is not dependent on it. Part of the action to achieve this goal says the city should encourage the development of offices, professional services, and industry in appropriate locations within the city. The future land use plan section of the comprehensive plan again references that plan is not inflexible or concrete. Additionally, from time to time, there will be certain uses that are proposed that will merit additional evaluation and create possibility for plan amendments. The industrial regional employment designation, which is what the applicant is proposing to do a comp plan amendment to, represents the highest intensity of land use in Sand Springs. The following districts are best suited for this district: commercial high intensity, industrial light, industrial medium. PUD if abutting an area designated for residential or transitional uses, or abutting an area zoned for residential uses or being used for residential purposes. Industrial heavy, again, the same sentence I just read about industrial uses next to residential be needed to have a PUD. The applicant is requesting a change from the comprehensive plan from residential to industrial light. Simultaneously, the applicant is requesting, as I mentioned before, the rezoning and the PUD. The future land use section of the plan indicates that industrial uses may be allowed near residential areas if planned unit developments are utilized to help mitigate potential impacts to adjacent properties. While the land use designations section speaks to industrial, medium, and heavy categories best suited for PUDs, it does not actually suggest that industrial categories utilize PUDs when adjacent to residential areas. The applicant is proposing to put a PUD. At the time the property was annexed, there was no request for the property owner to modify the comprehensive plan or to rezone the property to anything other than agricultural. This request is now triggered by the application for rezoning and the need for a comprehensive plan amendment to be facilitated to find the proposed zoning is consistent and in alignment with the City of Sand Springs comprehensive plan. I want to be clear, when the annexation of this property happened, the request at the time of the applicant was to bring the property in as ag. If this application fails today, the property is zoned agricultural. They knew that full well when they asked to have the property brought into the City of Sand Springs. The proposed change could be approved by finding that it is appropriate due to changing conditions in the area and unforeseen development proposals that could have been predicted at the time the plan was adopted. The proposal has demonstrated that it aligns with the goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan by furthering the plan's desires to strengthen the economy, the economic stability in the community by attracting businesses and encouraging growth and development. Also by strengthening the desire of various private sector investors to be in Sand Springs, the city is ultimately preparing itself for the ability to be sustainable long term. The plan speaks to the future of the community's ability to become an independent local economy that complements the surrounding region and not be dependent on it. The proposal to rezone the property and place a PUD overlay on the property is consistent with the industrial land use designation and its adjacency to residential properties. Lastly, the Sand Springs Zoning Code Chapter 20 recognizes amendments will be adopted and recognizes changes in the comprehensive plan to correct error or to recognize change or changing conditions in particular area of the jurisdiction. To go back to the rezoning and the PUD, staff, as I mentioned before, is recommending approval of both the rezoning and the PUD as submitted, with some changes the applicant also may bring up tonight. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
These questions will be from the board, is what he's referencing now. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Bates before we move on to the applicant? Okay, thank you, Brad. Okay, before. Just, yeah. Hold on. We're not taking questions now. Before I move on to the applicant, I'm going to touch on a couple of things. Item number 3, SSZ 517. What we're doing here is the commission will discuss and consider approving, denying, amending, revising, or continuing, and making a recommendation to the city council regarding the application of Lou Reynolds on behalf of Alan Ringel to rezone 826 plus acres from Ag, AG, to IL Industrial Light and PUD 039. Due to there being multiple parcels, each having a separate legal description, we will not try to repeat each legal description recorded in the agenda items and instead refer to the property as 826 plus acres, commonly known as being at approximately 56th Street North and Highway 97 in Osage County, Oklahoma. Item number 4, PUD 039. Commission will discuss and consider approving, denying, amending, revising, or continuing and make a recommendation to the city council regarding the application of Lou Reynolds on behalf of Alan Ringel to allow PUD 039 for the development of a data center project and related uses on 826 plus acres, commonly known as being at approximately 56th Street North and Highway 97 Osage County, Oklahoma. On item number 5, SSCPA-007, the commission will discuss and consider approving, denying, and amending, revising, or continuing, and making a recommendation to the city council regarding the application of Lou Reynolds on behalf of Alan Ringel to amend the Sand Springs Comprehensive Plan map from a residential designation to an industrial, light designation, and actually that, with an overlay known as PUD 039. The property is legally known as being 826 plus acres, commonly known as being at approximately 56th Street North and Highway 97 in Osage County, Oklahoma. Zoned AG, currently agricultural. Okay. With that, I just wanted to clarify that and let everybody know that we're here for, there are multiple different things that could happen with each one of these agenda items, just to clarify that. All right, so now we are going to move on to the applicant's representations, representatives. Would the applicant like to step forward and speak? How do you guys want to handle this? Mr. Reynolds, would you like to come up, or?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Chairman, my name is Lou Reynolds. My address is 2727 East 21st Street, Tulsa, Suite 200, 74114. I represent White Rose Partners. They're developing this Project Spring on behalf of Google. The first exhibit that I'd like to show you is the project. It's just an aerial map of the area. We've said it, so I won't go too deeply into this, but it contains 827 acres, and it's generally located north and east of West 56th Street North and Highway 97. The next, and this is why we're here, the next exhibit shows some of the existing utilities on the site, and the two primary ones there in red are two high voltage electrical transmission lines that are owned by PSO that crisscross the property. And this is the second page in that packet I gave you all. One line carries 345 kilovolts and the other line carries 138 kilovolts of electricity. With these transmission lines, together with the system enhancements to be paid for by Google, PSO will serve this property. As a result of the project, the electrical grid will be strengthened and be made more resilient, all of which will benefit not just the project, but the area. None of this will have any cost to the residential ratepayers. And this is a good time to break into the comprehensive plan and our application. At the time this property was annexed, no planning study or other determination was made as to the planning designation of the property. The property at the time of annexation was by default designated agricultural or residential under that 11-year-old comprehensive plan. You know, historically, comprehensive planning has failed to recognize the benefits of electrical transmission lines to a community. Most of them can still tell you to stay away from them. Today, we know that electrical transmission lines are as impactful as expressways, and that's really exactly what an electrical transmission line is. It's an electrical expressway that power the electrical distribution network for the community. Excuse me. Cities cannot grow without properly evaluating and receiving the full benefit of the electrical distribution lines, transmission lines in their area. Additionally, the property is accessed by Highway 97, and Highway 97 is a primary arterial and a major collector street on the city's major highway plan. The city's comprehensive plan designates Highway 97 as a transportation corridor. Excuse me. And Highway 97 has historically supported industrial development in Sand Springs. In this case, IL zoning overlaid with a PUD to utilize development area. And simply put, it's the third page in your packet, and it's that pink area, excuse me, in the development industry, we call that the donut hole. And anywhere within that pink area, we can put a building, but we limited this in this PUD by restricting the building area to 0.20 floor area ratio, we call it FAR in your zoning code, or no more than 20% of the property. There's been discussions back and forth, and we've just said some things and learned things after we said them. We had talked about reducing this from 75 as initially filed down to 1.0 FAR. And in that process, as we developed this PUD, we also learned that we want to screen our equipment yards. And then they take up quite a bit of room, and I'll talk about this standard later, but we agreed to put screen our equipment yard with screens that go up to the top, at least as high as the top of the equipment. That led to the notion of, why don't we just put it under a roof? If we put it under a roof, that becomes floor area ratio. And so when we amended our PUD for the final time, we amended it to 2.0 FAR to ensure that we'd have the ability to put roofs over our equipment yard or any of our other exposed equipment. And the remainder of the property is basically going to be building setbacks, some kind of open space, landscaping, enhanced landscaping and screening. So pink area looks big, but we can't build more than 20% of that area. My next exhibit shows the site setbacks and landscape buffers for the project, and this is the donut. The pink was the hole, and this is the donut, and looks kind of like the lime surprise at Krispy Kreme, but we've got a 100-foot green area, and that's our landscape buffer on 3 sides of the property. But down on the south end, going to the west for 3,500 feet, we've got an enhanced landscape buffer that I'm going to show you more detail about, but that's 200-foot wide landscape buffer, and the reason for this is closest to any homes in this area. The second thing we have is a setback of 300 feet, and that's in that brown zone. It's around all of the property except Highway 97, and there we have a 400-foot setback. And it's our goal along 97 to more or less make the property invisible there, and we achieve it except in 2 places. An additional condition we put in setbacks after dealing with the project's neighbors and things was a 700-foot backup generator setback from any existing residentially occupied structure, and that's from any boundary of the project. And within the lime green part of this landscape buffer, there's got to be at least one evergreen tree every 40 linear feet, or trees of the 4-inch caliber that we discussed. And pretty much through most of the property where we've got the green buffer, we have all that naturally. If you'll take the next exhibit, please. Okay, so this is, I've combined them all. And so we show the donut hole and the donut. And you can see the impact of the areas that buildings can be built in pink. And you can see the brown area that's open space. And you can see the landscape areas in there, both the 100-foot and 200 feet area. Next exhibit, here's our latest conceptual site plan. And this shows our buildings and equipment areas, and there's 3 data centers and 1 office building on the property. They're all well within the setbacks that we proposed. The next exhibit, these are the modifications we've made since filing this PUD application, and this has come back from a lot of talk. Sometimes we were talking to people, sometimes they were talking to us, but we listen from the city to government officials as well as our neighbors, do as much as we can to minimize any impact of this project on them. The first one is the reduction in the floor area ratio from the 0.75 to 0.20. And again, the 0.75 is what's allowed by right in your IL zoning. We've also, to reduce impervious surface, agreed to reduce our parking lot size from one space per 1,000 square feet of data center to one space per 20,000 square feet. We've had these setbacks have increased. When we initially filed, our building setback from the project boundaries were 200 feet. We've increased to the least of 300 feet. Of course, we're 400 feet from Highway 97. We've also agreed that our security fencing must be at least 200 feet from the project boundaries. This is to keep it out of any of the areas we've agreed to maintain landscaping in and protect trees. And we've also agreed to locate this to the interior side of these enhanced buffers that we're gonna put along the south boundary. The next one is the equipment screening and setbacks, and this came from our discussions with our neighbors. We've agreed to screen our mechanical equipment so it's not visible from the project boundary. And we agreed to put screening that's as tall as the tallest part of the equipment, and hence the idea that we might just put all this under a roof and stick it in the building. We've also added that setback that I discussed earlier, about 700 feet from any existing residence for our backup generators. And these are very substantial setbacks. We've also increased the landscape buffer. We talked about the 300-foot natural area around the perimeter of the project. We'll keep in a substantial condition as it is today. The landscape buffer, anywhere we add a tree, it's at least 8 feet high, 4-inch caliber. Now I want to talk about that intensified landscape buffer along the south boundary. And first goal of that is we're going to preserve all the existing vegetation